Hi, past, present, and future homeowners and sellers. Welcome back to the Property Buyer's Guide. I'm your host, your homegirl, Justina. So in our previous episodes, one of the episodes that we had was with the CIF, which is the Construction Industries Federation of Namibia. And we also had another episode where we were joined by an architect. Now, one of the phrases that kept coming up in these two episodes is ideally a principal agent. And what we've learned today is there are ideally three principal agents, or there are three individuals that can be a principal agent during a construction process or a construction project for that matter. So we spoke to an architect. We also learned that a civil engineer could be a principal agent. And so today we're actually joined by an individual an individual that has a profession that can also be seen as a principal agent on a construction process. We are joined by Mr. Bruno Coelho, and I will allow him to introduce himself. Welcome, Bruno.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you firstly for spending some time with us, allowing us to promote the profession.
So maybe let's delve right in, Bruno. Can you please tell us what is a quantity surveyor and why does one need one for their construction process?
Well, I think if I can quickly define it, quantity surveyor is a construction professional, and their main focus is managing and controlling the costs of a project during its life cycle. So the main roles would be estimating the project costs, then monitoring expenditure during the project life cycle.
Okay. And so it seems very important because whenever anyone is embarking on a construction journey, I think one of the things that keep coming up is costs. So you just mentioned that ideally a QS is someone who's going to help you manage these costs. So ideally, if I have now decided to embark on this construction process and I'm looking for a QS, a qualified QS, how do I go about that process?
That's a good question. I think we can start off by maybe identifying and discussing the two bodies involved. So we have the Institute of Namibian Quantity Surveyors, the INQS, and they are there to advance and promote the science and practice of the quantity surveying. They're also there to uphold the dignity of the profession, so on. They protect the interest of the members. So these members, the board is also appointed by the members. So if one is looking for, their website would list the registered firms currently registered in Namibia. Then the second body is the statutory body, which is the Namibian Council for Architects and Quantity Surveyors, the NCAQS. So this one is regulated by the government. So they register and regulate the professionals themselves to make sure that they adhere to certain standards, and they also protect the interest of the public. So when one is looking for a specific quantity surveyor, the council will have on their website the list of registered members.
And so ideally you could then rest assured that you're dealing with someone who sort of operates to a certain standard that belongs to an institute that sort of regulates how that individual would operate within that specific space.
Yes, correct. So we have two defining terms. We have the individual that is going through the in-training program. This is the pre-program before you write your exam and become a registered member. And that is a QS in training. And then we've got the registered members, which are defined as registered quantity surveyors.
Interesting.
Much like a chartered quantity surveyor in the UK.
Now that we have an understanding of what a QS is, a quantity surveyor, and ideally where to go about if you're looking for one or you need the services of one, can you then maybe explain what their importance is when an individual is going through a home building or home renovation process?
So as we identified earlier, is that the main role of a quantity surveyor is to manage and control costs. So ideally you'd want a homeowner to approach a quantity surveyor in the initial planning stage of a project. This allows you to have an understanding of realistic budgets, project costs. It also allows you to identify certain financial risks early on. So I think that's quite important for an homeowner.
And so how exactly does a QS go about helping you identify, these budget constraints, or sort of help you that you don't have overruns in your budget when you've actually decided to commence with this process?
So initially, what we do is we do a project estimate. So that sort of defines the project cost in the initial stages. So this allows the homeowner to then allocate the budget for the project. So within doing that, thereafter we can look at value engineering, maybe proposing alternative cost-effective design changes, sort of to bring down costs if need be, and so on.
Yeah. So then, how do I say this? Because for the most part, if you're thinking of starting a construction process, or you want to build, or you want to do some reno to your home, for me anyway, the first person that actually comes to mind is a contractor. You would think you'd hire or procure the services of a contractor, and ideally they provide you with this quote. And throughout, we've learned today that a QS is actually the individual that would help with the pricing and the budgeting of the process. So can you please help us understand where the pricing of a contractor and where the pricing of a QS would come in, and how those two would sort of work together within a construction project?
Okay, so a registered quantity surveyor, what we tend to do is once the initial budget is made up and agreed to, then we go about producing bills of quantities or tender documentation.
Yes.
So these tender documents get distributed to various contractors, whether it be selected or it's open tendering. Then once these documents are received back, they then scrutinized and evaluated to make sure that the pricing is market related, is it competitive, to make sure that it's clearly defining the scope of the works.
So just to understand again, you're saying that I'm getting a quote from a contractor, and that is what would be submitted to the quantity surveyor, and he would scrutinize the quote, or is it vice versa?
No, well, we create a document that's itemized.
Okay.
Speaking to the scope of the works. So the contractor will then just will provide their rates for each of these items.
Okay.
And then in totality, that document gives you the total cost.
Okay.
The construction cost of the project. And then outside of that, you would have your fees for your professionals, which together make up the project cost.
Okay. So ideally, all the fees would be collated, if you can say, on one document at the end of the day, and then they would have sort of been input from the contractor, the engineer, and also the quantity surveyor.
And no, the tender document is specific to the contractor.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we define the tender document as the total construction cost.
Okay.
So that's just to build the specific project.
Yes.
Or the cost involved to build that specific project, where the professional fees are handled completely separate and do not form part of that document.
Okay. And so that's why you then want that document to go through both the hands of the contractor and the quantity surveyor to ensure that the budget, to ensure that there are no budget overruns.
Yes.
Or to minimize, rather, the chances of there being a budget overrun.
Yeah, correct. So the QS will then, once the project starts, the QS will then constantly be tracking the project expenditure.
Okay.
And this allows to make sure that we don't have budget overruns.
Okay, so it's not, he or she is just not involved at the beginning to say, oh, listen, this is the pricing, and they hand you over to the contractor and that's that. They would ideally be there throughout the entire process to, like you said, track the expenditures throughout the project.
Yes, ideally, our fees are built up in certain stages.
Yeah.
So a homeowner is able to engage a quantity surveyor for specific stages. So you are able to provide estimating services and provide a bill of quantities.
Yeah.
And then step away from the construction.
Okay.
But ideally, you'd want to have all the professionals involved throughout the life cycle of the project.
Okay.
And this way it's very important to then track the expenses during the construction stage, because you tend to have certain scope changes or material changes, and there you want to monitor that so that you don't have cost escalations.
Okay. So basically that's why it becomes important, as I mentioned at the beginning of the project, to have a principal agent that sort of oversees this entire project for you and is able to liaise with the different parties, especially if it's a smaller project such as a construction home where, you know, the assumption is the person who's having this house built doesn't have so much knowledge or exposure within that space. And there's at least an agent that they can trust that sort of oversees the different professionals that will be working on the project.
Yes, so ideally you'd want the homeowner should be leveraging off the expertise of these professionals. So that's where the principal agent comes in communicating this complex construction project back to the client in more layman's terms.
In more layman's terms. Okay. Thank you so much. I think you've clarified a lot. For the most part, I also didn't know what a QS was, so I've definitely learned a lot. And I'm sure the audience has also learned a lot. So thank you very much for joining us. We've really, really learned a lot. We know now what a quantity surveyor is, how and when to involve them in your project, and how to source, a qualified or a registered QS rather, for that matter.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. And for our viewers at home, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Property Buyer's Guide. I hope you've learned a lot, and please don't forget to tune in next week. Bye.